Up on Network Africa today. United Nations says Sudan spiraling out of control after 4 months of war. Russian President Vladimir Putin speaks to Mali's military leader about the coup in Niger Republic. Plus dozens dead as armed forces clash in Libya. Hello and welcome to Network Africa and Channels Television. I'm Anne Mwawadu. We begin in Sudan, where the 4 months of conflict has caused huge humanitarian disasters and human rights violations. According to the spokesperson for the World Health Organization, Margaret Harris, the conflict had devastating impact on people's lives, health and well-being. Sudan has seen continuous outbreak of measles, malaria and dengue fever, and about 1/3 of its Sudanese kids are now 5 years old are suffering long-term malnutrition.
67% of hospitals in the affected areas are out of service. In these past 4 months, since the conflict began, WHO has verified 53 attacks on healthcare, which have killed 11 people, injured 38, and along with other disruptions, these attacks have denied access to care for tens of thousands of people.
Also, the United Nations is warning millions of people are running out of food in Sudan and they are dying due to lack of health care. In a joint statement, the UN said the time is running out for farmers to plant the crops that will feed them and their neighbors. Medical supplies are scarce and the situation is already spiraling out of control. Sudan has been witnessing deadly clashes between the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, in the capital Khartoum and other areas since April the 15th this year.
These leaders of global humanitarian organizations warn that the war is destroying people's lives and their homeland and violating their basic human rights. They call on the parties to the conflict to end the fighting, protect civilians, and give humanitarian organizations unfettered access to all people in need in all areas of Sudan. They remind the fighters that attacking civilians, looting humanitarian supplies, targeting aid workers and hospitals, or blocking aid, things we have seen throughout those 4 months, may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Since the start of the conflict in Sudan on the 15th of April, over 4.3 million people have been forced to flee. This includes over 900,000 refugees and asylum seekers who fled to neighboring countries, and 195,000 South Sudanese forced to return to South Sudan. Within Sudan, over 3.2 million people have been internally displaced, including more than 187,000 refugees already residing in the country at the start of the crisis. As people continue to flee, displacement sites within Sudan and in neighboring countries are rapidly becoming overcrowded.
Now, while it's difficult to establish an exact number of casualties due to the intensity of the fighting and the fact that the remains of many of those killed have not been collected, identified, or buried, tentative figures indicate that more than 4,000 people have so far been killed, including hundreds of civilians. The UN Human Rights Office has also received credible reports of incidents of sexual violence, of some 32 incidents of sexual violence against 73 victims as of the 2nd of August. This includes at least 28 incidents of rape. Men in RSF uniforms were implicated in at least 19 incidents as perpetrators, and the actual number of cases is likely much higher.
Many of the partners who work on gender-based violence and providing services, treatment, and case management, as well as counseling, have reported a 50% increase in gender-based violence since the start of the conflict. And we know that that's only the tip of the iceberg. In many cases, particularly around sexual violence, the numbers of people who come forth and report is very underreported. It limits survivor access to medical counseling and the legislative services, as well as the untold suffering and impunity for the perpetrators.
In the meantime, the General Commander of the Sudanese Armed Forces, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, says the SAF is working on a political roadmap that all parties concerned can accept to hold elections. In a televised speech on the occasion of the 69th anniversary of the SAF's establishment, the Sudanese army chief vowed that the SAF will stand with the Sudanese people and support their legitimate right to establishing a state where the law, democracy, and institutions prevail. He also pledged to reach a political roadmap that is very strong, fair, and acceptable to the people and leads the country to elections where the people choose who to rule. In his speech, Al-Burhan accused the rival paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, of spreading chaos and creating political tension and economic crisis through misleading, lying, falsifying facts, and buying off the people. Now let's talk to VOA's Africa correspondent, Mohammed Yusuf, who joins me now from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you very much, Mohammed, for joining us on Network Africa.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we know this war has dragged on for more than 4 months now, something that began in April. What more can you tell us about the situation on the ground, especially in the Darfur region?
According to reports and the sources in the country, Khartoum situation hasn't changed. There's still the battlefields between the Sudan's armed forces and RSF, particularly in the capital. But they're more worrying, particularly in the west region, Darfur region. That has been a center now. People have been giving a lot of attention to what's happening in Darfur. The past 2-3 days, there were reports of violence, of eruption of conflict, heavy artillery in Nyala, the headquarters of West, the headquarters of Darfur state. That has been much of the conflict. The reports of people fleeing. El Janina has also witnessed more fighting in the past 4 months, also since the war began in April. There's a lot of concern. Concerns have been shown, particularly by the UN. This month's report by Amnesty International accuses the RSF and the Sudan Armed Forces and other militias of war crimes, particularly that is taking place in Darfur. That has been a center of the country's conflict for the past 20-30 years. The situation hasn't changed. And now the conflict between the warring the RSF and the Sudan, the SAF, now has ignited the situation, has made the situation even worse. The reports of RSF and Arab militias now attacking African tribes in those areas, and many people are fleeing the region into neighboring Chad.
Now, let's talk about the casualties of this conflict. The Sudanese Health Ministry is saying at least 3,000 people have died and more than 6,000 people have been injured. There's also been attacks on healthcare facilities as well. Many wonder how people would even begin to pick up pieces and carry on with their lives when all this is done.
According to the UN estimates, of course, they're giving the figure to be higher than that. The estimate is about 4,000. That is tentatively. They're saying it's even more than that. Of course, we know that humanitarian organizations are having difficulties to access the country, so that's a figure that they gave, but the number could be higher than that. But the question is, they also, WHO is saying that there have been attacks in healthcare facilities, 53 of them, which has resulted to 11 deaths, 38 injuries. Reason why someone will attack a clinic or a healthcare facility, these are last places where people seek refuge, seek healthcare facilities, healthcare assistance, and this is now an area that is becoming also under attack. The question now is, where is safe in Sudan, where people can continue to attack healthcare facilities? Now, where does the country now move from here? People are really concerned. There is a picture that is portrayed out of the country. There's also that is within the country, and the situation is very dire. We're talking of 1 million people fleeing out of the country into neighboring countries, about 3.45 million people displaced in the country, and that is becoming more dangerous by the day as war continues, and there's no end to this conflict, and that will really concern people if health facilities continue to be attacked, continue to looted, and people don't respect those facilities. It shows a lot. People will be worried a lot if this kind of atrocities or conflict into healthcare facilities continues.
And now in all of this chaos, the Sudanese Armed Forces is saying that it is working on a political roadmap that all parties concerned can accept to hold elections. Have there been any comments or even reactions from the rival Rapid Support Forces regarding this?
Not we know of RSF. We know that they were the two protagonists into all those conflicts. They kicked out of the politicians, the civil service, the women out of power, and they wanted to consolidate between themselves. Now they fought over it. Now the SAF is saying we're going to start another political roadmap. We don't know what that means. It appears that they're not going to provide or to include RSF. But they've always been thinking of that if this war continues, you're engaging two people. Of course, this is RSF and SAF. Now the war is going on for 4 months. The two sides are in Jeddah, trying to talk, and there's no end in that conflict. Now, what does that mean? Then you need to bring more people of Sudanese society back into the fold. Now, trying to engage them and try to reason with them and see where the solution now may come from. And it was two of them. Now, undoubtedly, now the roadmap is going to include more people. And this is what they have been avoiding. And people who have been engaged in this process since the ouster of former President al-Bashir, it's been that they want all these armed people to vacate power, to give power to civilians. That has been a challenge. And Sudanese army since independence, they have always remained at the shadows in the state and how the country is run. Now conflict is there. Will they be willing to vacate now? It seems they've destroyed the country. Will they vacate? I think we'll see if what this roadmap they're talking about is going to now give civilians more power to engage and to look forward and how now they can solve the country and bring sort of stability and possibly hold elections.
And talking about stability, Mohammed, there's been a lot of peace talks to try to get this conflict to a resolution. I mean, we've seen interventions globally and even from Africa, from AU, the United Nations. Have we gotten to a point where both parties are completely turning deaf ears to any negotiation effort at the moment?
It is for them. Being their representatives in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, they're sending a message to the outside world. We're engaging. That is what they're trying to prove, to show. But the situation on the ground is very different. We are talking of accusations, allegations of war crimes. Now we are seeing a situation, for example, we've seen Al-Burhan, the General Al-Fatah Al-Burhan of the SAF, talking of war crimes, accusing RSF. There are more now people are talking of serious abuses that is taking place, in particularly in Darfur. And now the debate is now moving away from what's happening, the two generals, RSF and SAF. Now it appears more of approach taking on a civilian perspective, a humanitarian approach. And are they now, is that debate is shifting more of a civilian? And I think in a way some observers saying they quite now feel that the usefulness for them now, this is now going beyond them. And for that reason, that's why you're seeing them now talking more about civilian casualties, abuses, accusations of who is abusing what and who is doing what in certain areas. With time, we'll see in the coming days whether they're very serious with that. But for what we understand, is now really catching up with them, and everyone is trying to push or say to play a safe that, oh look, I'm not involved in all these abuses. It is these guys or these other people who are involved. And now all those issues now will be bring on the table. Before it was just the two of them. Now we're talking of war crimes, abuses. More people will come on the table. Are they trying to push that away? We'll see how that pans out in the coming days or weeks. But undoubtedly now, more people now will be engaged in the talks as war continues here.
We'll definitely keep our eyes on that story. Thank you very much. VOA's Africa correspondent, Mohammed Yusuf. Thanks for your time and your contribution on Network Africa.
Pleasure.
In a moment after the break, Zimbabwe police arrest 40 opposition campaigners as election nears. We'll bring you the details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Elsewhere, Libyan medical sources say at least 27 people have been killed and more than 100 others injured in clashes between two powerful armed factions in Tripoli. According to authorities, violence broke out late on Monday after the Special Deterrence Force, the SDF, seized the commander of the 444 Brigade. It subsided after the commander was released on Tuesday evening, but the fighting shattered months of relative calm in Tripoli. A 2020 ceasefire has brought a measure of peace to Libya, but entrenched factionalism constantly threatened to upset the peace there. Niger's junta appointed civilian Prime Minister Ali Mohamed Lamine Zain and other two members of the ruling military council have visited Chad for talks with interim President Gen Mahamat Idris Deby. Mr. Zain, who has emerged as a diplomatic face of the military government, said that his country was now under a transitional government and reiterated the junta's readiness for talks. However, he says the junta will only talk to partners who respect his country's sovereignty. Chadian President Deby has made efforts to mediate between the Niger junta and the ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. But Chad has also said that it will not participate in any military action against Niger and the coup leaders. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has spoken with Mali's military leader, Assimi Goïta, in a telephone call on Tuesday about the recent coup in Niger. This was confirmed in a social media post by the Mali's military leader, where Mr. Putin stressed the importance of a peaceful resolution of the situation for a more stable Sahel. The call adds to growing fears from the West over Russia's influence in Western Africa. The Russian president has now called for a return to constitutional order in Niger Republic, while Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has welcomed the coup. Niger has strategic significance for the United States, China, Europe, and Russia, and has served as a hub for foreign forces fighting a regional Islamist insurgency. It also has a wealth of uranium and oil resources. From there, we move to Rwanda, where the fugitive Florence Kayishema, who has been in the custody in South Africa, has been arrested once again on an order for his transfer to Arusha, Tanzania, to stand trial for genocide. The latest developments, which were at the request of the United Nations International Residual Mechanism for Criminal Tribunals, seem to have caught his lawyers by surprise. He was arrested while in holding cells at the High Court in Cape Town earlier on Tuesday. The tribunal wants him to answer to charges that he allegedly orchestrated the killing of approximately 2,000 Tutsi refugees at a Catholic church in Rwanda during the 1994 genocide. However, he has not officially pleaded to the charges against him, but has previously denied having any role in the crimes. Several West African migrants have been found dead aboard a boat drifting off Cape Verde, along with around 40 survivors. According to authorities, the boat had reportedly set off from Senegal 1 month ago with around 100 people on board. It's believed the vessel was heading for the Spanish Canary Islands and a popular gateway for migrants to the European Union. Thousands of people fleeing poverty and war risk their lives to make that dangerous crossing every year, often in modest boats or even motorized canoes supplied by smugglers. However, the exact number of casualties had not yet been confirmed. Over in Zimbabwe, where police have arrested 40 members of an opposition coalition who were camping ahead of elections next week. Citizens Coalition for Change, the CCC spokesperson Fadzayi Mahere, said that the Gladmore Hakata, the party's Glenview South MP mandate, was among those arrested. A police statement shared on social media said the CCC had engaged in activities not mentioned in their notification for a rally in the suburb. The police said they held a vehicle procession, obstructed traffic, and chanted party slogans on the streets, prompting a police response after residents reported the matter. The Southern African country heads to the polls on August the 23rd to elect a president and legislature in what analysts are expecting to be a tense affair marked by a crackdown on dissent and fears of vote rigging. And back here in Nigeria, the need to provide adequate funding and educational materials for students living with disabilities is germane and must be given special attention. And this formed the major discourse at the 17th convocation ceremony of the Federal College of Education Special Oyo, where calls were made for the government to turn the school to a federal university for special education. The 46-year-old institution opened her gates to Channels Television to observe the special school, its operations, and challenges before it.
This setup at the Federal College of Education Special in Oyo Town is familiar. The only thing that stands her out among 158 colleges of education in Nigeria is a special education school. It's one of the very few government-owned institutions in sub-Saharan Africa that has a special school on campus. Teachers here are also specially trained, as it takes about 4 times as much effort as what it takes to teach students without special needs.
And it runs like that.
Special education is generally underfunded. We have our students with various forms of disability. Some of them are persons with visual impairment. Some of them are persons with hearing impairment. They have persons with physical challenge and health also impaired. All these, they need a lot of gadgets to learn.
In this place, we are training those with visual impairment how to use computer effectively to communicate globally and at the same time to do the necessary things that they needed for their daily activities.
The special school has 8 departments. We visit the department for the hearing impaired. Here, words do not amount to much, and they rely heavily on sign language.
That is from the pinna down to the tympanic membrane.
The audiology laboratory reveals a lot about what goes on here.
Sometimes, students will be having problem in class, not necessarily because they are dull, but because of communication issue. He's not hearing and he keeps on pretending. But when we confirm, oh, this is the problem this person has, then is it total or partial? If it is total, then we recommend sign language. You learn the art of sign language and you communicate effectively well without any problem. And if it is partial, we refer to those ones as persons with hardness of hearing. Then recommendation and fitting of hearing aid comes in.
At the Department for the Visually Impaired, sign language is of no use. They rely on instructional materials like braille machines, abacus, and others specially made for them.
12 plus 13.
Some of the students have been going through the process for a while and speak about their challenges.
I never know there is a hope for the challenged persons. But since when I came to school, it makes me feel encouraged and know that I'm okay in the society.
As much as the school is set up to help those with special needs, the management of the institution laments the dwindling number of fresh intakes. Out of the allotted 5,000 students by JAM, barely 2,000 students get registered.
People don't want to patronize NC, education in this part of the country. In the north, it's better, but here, people, because it is the qualification that qualify you to enter universities. For instance, for biology, that we also demand here at the College of Education. And you stay 3 years here, there they stay 4 years. If you live here, you go for another 3 years over there. So people feel cheated. So people don't patronize this type of education in this part of the world again.
The 17th convocation ceremony graduated over 13,000 students, out of which only 600 are from the special school. As part of the ceremony, the students are shown that this is just the beginning of great things to come as they celebrate one of their lecturers who just became a PhD holder in mathematics from the University of Ibadan, despite the fact that he has multiple disabilities.
Dr. Odebode with PhD in mathematics.
The institution also bestowed honorary awards on the governors of Oyo and Borno states for their contribution to educational development.
And finally on the program, Google has announced plans to train 20,000 Nigerian women and youths in digital skills and provide a grant of $1.6 million to support government targets of creating 1 million tech jobs. Speaking at a meeting in Abuja with Google Director for West Africa, Olumide Balogun, Nigerian Vice President Kashim Shettima says that Nigeria plans to create digital jobs for its teeming youth population, adding that President Bola Tinubu's administration is determined to harness the potential of Nigeria's young population to grow the digital sector. However, no firm timeline was set out for these plans. And this is where we draw the cuttings on Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Mwawadu.